Hello and welcome to a very special edition of our show, Tag1 TeamTalks. This is talk number 3 in our mini-series with our guests, the engineering team of the Drupal Association. My name is Preston So. I'm editor-in-chief at Tag1 Consulting. I'll be the host of today's episode and moderating it as well. I'm joined today by 3 of my dear friends and colleagues in the Drupal ecosystem. First, Tim Lehnen, who is the Chief Technology Officer of the Drupal Association. We're also joined today by Neil Drumm in New York City, who is the Senior Technologist at the Drupal Association, not too far from where I am as well in New York City. And we're also joined by Michael Meyers, Managing Director of Tag1, who joins us from the Berkshires, Massachusetts. And Tim joins us from Portland, Oregon today. So let's just jump right in. I think one of the things that people are really interested in right now, as a result of this amazing migration that we've talked about several times now on the Tag1 TeamTalk show, is this migration over to GitLab and the amazing capabilities that that introduces to the workflows that contributors want to engage with on a daily basis. And one of those, of course, is the whole merge request paradigm in GitLab. Now, Neil, I understand that you've been doing a lot of recent work on kind of enabling and supporting forks and merge requests in GitLab, as well as this new project that we spoke about previously, GitLab.CI. So very briefly, I wanted to ask, just for those of us who might not know about what forks and merge requests mean, especially those of us who aren't as familiar with GitLab, why is it that the community is so excited? Why is it that contributors to Drupal are so excited about forks and merge requests in the Drupal community? What's the history behind this as well, and why is this such a big step for us?
So Drupal has had a patch-based workflow. So to contribute to the code, Drupal code base, you would have to make your edits and then make a patch and upload that. And it's just not a workflow that a lot of people are familiar with if they've started development since GitLab has existed or GitHub has existed. So we're looking at modernizing that and really leveraging Git so that people can push their changes to each other, and the maintainers of the project can pull those, merge those into the projects themselves.
I would add to that, one of the reasons that it's sort of particularly exciting for people like me who aren't the hardcore of the hardcore engineers or developers is this actually ultimately enables a complete end-to-end contribution in Drupal, all that can be done in the browser. Like you can start your fork of changes, use the web IDE to make your suggested changes, comment on that with the maintainer, all getting pushed back to the issue, open your merge request, have it merged without having to use a command line interface, without having to run your local development environment necessarily, or any of those things. So I think it'll make it accessible to a lot of folks who want to make smaller changes or making their first change in the Drupal ecosystem, and hopefully make it easier for them to join our community.
I love that. And one thing that I do want to mention is that I think that the Drupal Association, obviously with the support of Tag1, has been really working to improve that developer and contributor experience in ways that are really unrecognizable from how those previous paradigms were working. And I think that's a huge testament to just how much technical heft is behind this kind of migration. And so we've just talked about merge requests and forks and how they allow for contributors to, as you said, Tim, make these small changes and make maintainers' lives easier. But I also know that that these issue forks and merge requests are also going to be part and parcel to the existing Drupal.org issue queue. Now, I know that one of the things that's always been interesting as a source of both joy and despair has been how to integrate that Drupal.org issue queue with some other platform. So I'm curious, why are we kind of bringing all of those paradigms that GitLab provides into the Drupal.org issue queue as opposed to just migrating over to GitLab issues? Wouldn't that be easier?
Good question. I think there are certainly ways in which it would be easier, but there's also some pros and cons to that approach. that haven't been totally resolved. So for example, if we were using GitLab issues, anybody who's used GitHub or GitLab, totally familiar to them, right? It's very simple, it's very easy to use, not hard to do at all. But on the downside, the metadata that you can use to organize your issues, you know, in Drupal, in our issue queue, you have a component dropdown for what aspect of your project you're working on. You have a version dropdown to organize what you're filing the issue against. There's sort of limited taxonomies that we currently use to organize things in the Drupal space that you can sort of substitute for in the GitLab space using their custom labels functionality, but I'm not quite sure that it would work at our scale just yet. And you know, in my own experience, I've never yet seen a GitLab project or even a GitHub project, I don't think, that had more than like 20,000 open issues on a single project. And Drupal core has that. There's almost 30,000 open in Drupal core right now, and almost 100,000 for Drupal core just in the total history. So there's a lot of this metadata and information that's useful for understanding, sorting, and prioritizing open issues that I'm not quite sure we could replicate yet. And furthermore, the whole contribution credit system that's part of what we do just isn't available in the context of GitLab issues. So I think by taking this first step, we can maximize both what we do well and what happens well using the GitLab tooling, as well as create a bridge for maybe exploring more of that in the future.
That's very interesting. You know, I think that the challenges around Drupal.org and the fact that, you know, as you mentioned, Tim, there are so many open issues, so many artifacts, so many things that we have to consider, makes this something that, you know, we can't just, you know, lift and shift over to a new kind of paradigm for this. But, you know, one of the things that I think would be really useful is to dig into some of the fundamental concepts here. And I think that, you know, for those of us, especially like myself, who, you know, I've only used GitLab in passing, only in certain situations. I've never actually used a merge request workflow all the way through. Let's start with some simple term definitions, I think. So, you know, maybe Neil, this is something for you. What is an issue fork, and how exactly does this differ from making a fork on a platform like GitHub, which a lot of folks are familiar with?
Yeah, so in the Drupal community, especially contributing to Drupal core, but a lot of the bigger contrib projects as well, there's a lot of collaboration going on. On average, Drupal core has about five people contributing to each issue. And we wanted to make sure that we still have that collaborative aspect. You know, with a patch workflow, anyone can download the patch, apply it to their local code base, modify it, and upload a different version of that. So what we're doing is having issue forks, one fork of the repository per project or per issue, where anyone can get access to that and push to any branch in that fork. So if, you know, it's a straightforward issue, people can keep pushing to the same branch, or if there's some divergent ways to potentially implement the fix for that issue, you can have multiple branches. And that's really, that's the key thing that's different for Drupal. With a fork on GitHub, it's really in your namespace and you're the one maintaining it, and you're expected to push that issue through to completion if you still have the motivation to do that and want to get it solved.
One of the things I love about this new paradigm, you know, obviously one of the biggest issues I think that is tough for contributors is you have to create a new patch, a new interdiff, a new X, Y, and Z every single time. And, you know, all of us have aliased commands now to do those sorts of things in our respective terminals. But this really kind of turns the whole model on its head and really kind of makes Drupal very similar in a lot of ways to a lot of other open source projects that allow you to do exactly that sort of thing, where you have an issue fork, you push changes to it, you can keep on pushing changes to it, and it's automatically updated. There's no need to kind of manually upload patches, manually do the sorts of things that have been done before. I love that about this kind of new milestone for us. So let's talk about how these issue forks so one thing I'm having a little bit of trouble wrapping my head around is, so if we have an issue fork, like how does that differ from a pull request in GitHub? What's a merge request? And what are some of the things, given that we've got this amazing history behind Drupal and these modern tools that we're looking to adopt, what are some of the special considerations or nuances that Drupal projects have to face when it comes to enabling GitLab style or GitLab native merge requests?
So yeah, as far as I know, pull requests and merge requests, they're pretty much the same. GitLab calls them merge requests, GitHub calls them pull requests. They're both, the maintainer can merge a branch in. And yeah, what those are, merge requests, is once you've gotten some work in a branch on the issue fork ready to be tested and ready for review, you can open up a merge request for that branch, and that will set up a place for people to comment on lines of code, set up a place for DrupalCI to start testing the merged commit, and the collaboration in the review phase of completing an issue.
And that's sort of like the RTBC state almost for in old Drupal parlance. It's like when the issue is sort of ready for review, for community testing. It needs review or RTBC, somewhere in between. You open that merge request, you kick off the tests, and people can comment directly on the technical solution. And Neil, you did something clever with the way the merge request, those comments actually appear. Because one of the issues is, once you open that merge request, now there's a second comment stream. There's the main issue, and then there's the merge request comment stream. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so with Drupal issues, what people are used to working with is a single thread of conversation. Everything's chronological. People refer back to comment number, whatever. And if you're coming to an issue, you can look back to when you last visited it and just read through and know that you've seen everything about that issue. So that's something that that we wanted to preserve with this. So we are bringing all the activity from the merge request, the commenting on specific bits of code. Those are threaded comments as well. GitLab does a good job of that UI. We're not going to rebuild that, but we'll bring back that activity to the issue page. So the comments on the merge request will be interleaved with the comments on the issue. And something that we are doing that's a bit different than the existing Git integration under the hood is with the existing Git integration, we're bringing all of the Git metadata into Drupal.org's database and maintaining basically a copy of the Git repository in MySQL database, but we're skipping all of that for merge requests. All of that activity is brought in with JavaScript on the front end. So it's much less for us to keep in sync, and we can really lean on having a light integration and letting GitLab do what GitLab's good at.
I love this because it kind of keeps the Drupal.org experience intact in that people go down their familiar pathways, their familiar happy paths to get to issues that they need, which I think is a very, very important aspect of this. But they can use those really nice added little functionality that GitLab provides embedded in that issue queue. It's really an incredible kind of thing. One question I had, Neil, was does this also enable things like GitHub style inline code comments where you can comment on code diffs or lines of code or even particular keywords or indications within the code?
Yep. Yeah. So yeah, GitLab has the commenting on lines of code in the diff or in the commits, and those are threaded, can mark threads as resolved or not, so can keep track of what bits of the what bits still need to be resolved. What else does it do? They have suggesting changes, so it's a little bit of cumbersome markdown syntax. Like a one-line suggestion to change is pretty easy. You could do multi-line too, but those are they're improving their UI for that. So yeah, it's really the full-featured what you would expect from a code review experience nowadays. Wow,
that's incredible. You know, the fact that there's even code suggestions is remarkable. I'm really excited to try that out. And I think this is really revolutionary for Drupal. You know, I think one of the things that, you know, has always been somewhat of a you know, maybe not, you know, definitely a problem in some ways, but actually a good thing in other ways, is the fact that every single Drupal.org issue becomes this compendium and this long kind of bookshelf annals of history of every single person who's ever had a thought on that issue. And, you know, I think that, you know, a lot of us who are in the Drupal contributing world are very used to that kind of model where you see this single chronological thread that goes through the issue. You have one single source of truth for all the activity. But on the merge request, I think it's really great that you can have these multiple threads of conversation. You have these, you know, you have the ability to have sub-conversations that don't necessarily muddle some of the higher level discussion taking place. I think that's amazing. So quick question, when exactly is this all going to be available? I just looked on Drupal.org. I don't see anything there right now. When is it going to be around, and when can we try it out?
So yeah, we enabled this in beta for some projects the week of DrupalCon Global. And right now there's over 100 projects that are using this right now. And the issue forks and merge requests, those are all in a pretty good spot. The bringing activity back to the issue, that's kind of a, I'd call it a proof of concept right now. There's a lot more kind of detail and UX work we could do to make that look a little better. Like we have a little resolved flag or not resolved flag for those threads, but we could probably do like a bigger visual treatment because you really don't need to care about the resolved threads probably. And the big chunk we have left is actually integrating this with DrupalCI. So we'll probably get into that a little bit later.
Wonderful. Yeah, and I think that this is really exciting, you know, because you know, obviously it's in a beta where you want to make sure to iron out all those potential issues that might surface, all those potential foibles or head scratchers that might kind of come out. One curiosity that I had though is, you know, I'd love to keep in track and stay in sync with the state of the beta and some of the learnings that you all have at the Drupal Association. So out of curiosity, how can I, you know, in the time before, you know, this all comes out, how can I find out about where the beta stands right now and what's currently available to be used in that beta?
So the easy to remember URL is get.drupalcode.org/issue. And that has a link to the documentation where we have the current status at the top and links to all of the issues that are in progress for actually building this out. You know, Drupal.org, it's a bunch of modules and we work in the issue queue for the most part. And yeah, the opt-in for your project is linked there. And yeah, that's the best place to get started.
Yeah, I would add, we've had, as Neil pointed out, we've had more than 100 projects opt into using this forks and merge request functionality. For many of them, it's mostly the existing maintainer or maintainers just using it to do their own work a little bit faster and more efficiently, but there are some larger projects in there as well that are doing it with external contributors. And so far, the feedback has been really, really positive. It's been a very successful beta. And so really, it is mostly a focus on UX improvements to what's already there and enabling testing before we'll be able to start moving out.
Wonderful, and we definitely want to see that UI as stable as possible and as usable as possible. By the way, that issue that Neil mentioned, we'll link it in the notes of the show. That's issue number 3152637, opt-in to the Drupal.org issue forks and merge requests beta. Not a very clear title of what it's trying to do, but Neil, I think I might have cut you off. You were about to say something there.
Let's see. So yeah, the next step will be enabling these for Drupal core. So yeah, we're really looking forward to getting at testing the limits when these are used collaboratively, multiple people contributing to an issue fork, seeing how that goes, and testing out on some core issues. And similar to opt-in per project, we'll be able to also opt-in per core issue. So can test that out with a few hopefully short-lived issues to exercise it a bit. Then, you know, I think once it's gone through that proving stage, then it'll pretty quickly go into general availability. We can always, we'll keep iterating on the UI from there. And the main functionality gap is testing right now. That's the one thing we don't have. So once a merge request is open, shipping that to DrupalCI and having that test a merge, what would be the merge commit. But we're in the, I think, the final stages of getting that working.
I'd love to dig in a little bit more into kind of the challenges with DrupalCI. You know, you mentioned that testing is a very big challenge. Is there any insight that you can share about kind of what sorts of things about DrupalCI make it challenging to integrate with merge request tests?
So for the first pass, we're going to stick with pretty much the same DrupalCI. It'll be testing. The main difference will be in the code base setup. Instead of applying a patch, it is fetching the ref of what would be the merge commit if it was merged from GitLab. So it's testing both the what's in the branch and upstream, merged with upstream. But GitLab CI is something we're really looking forward to implementing, and that will kind of force us into a even more container-based workflow. Everything's containers, and we're using containers for DrupalCI already. It's not really too big of a leap, but kind of the big part is the code base assembly, getting core and all of the modules to be tested. That is not in a container right now.
Yeah.
So my coworker Ryan's working on that, and yeah, it'll be our first really using containers as a full stack, setting up Kubernetes, because that's where GitLab goes, and there's a lot of other details to figure out as well, like cost, making sure that we can do these all on spot requests with AWS to save costs, but that looks like there's a way to do that now. And
yeah, I mean, stepping back a little bit, part of the reason that CI in general for Drupal is complicated, that's just not specific to DrupalCI as an implementation or what the GitLab CI implementation will look at, is just the scope of what we do for testing in the Drupal project, right? We have, as our coworker Ryan likes to say, we have this Cartesian product of all of the variations of what you're testing. So are you testing this patch from that issue on that branch of that project on, this database, like which version of MySQL? It could be one of, 6 versions, or of Postgres, or of, which version of PHP are you testing against? And so you have all these combinations of testing variables that go into each set of testing. So the complexity it creates is in both the experience of configuring and choosing what is available to test, as well as like managing the defaults to make sure that we're testing what's most important and saving money on sort of unnecessary duplicate tests. And then, you know, whenever we look at integrating the CI system into using GitLab CI as its sort of dispatcher to replace our custom dispatcher, we have to make sure it accommodates those same workflows, those same combinations and permutations of available environments and code base and configuration. Plus, we'd also like to make it possible using some of the tools that GitLab CI can use for users to define their own custom environments. Like right now, you can't use, if you're testing something with the search subsystem of Drupal, you can't stand up a test infrastructure that has Solr servers set up, for example. So we'd like to make those sorts of things possible on a relatively limited basis, because resources aren't unlimited, but that would be powerful as well. So those are some of the things we're looking for as kind of like the follow-up work to getting the initial merge request testing in place.
Yeah, and on resources, with DrupalCI, we go ahead and throw relatively large AWS instances at testing. So 64 processor instances, and that's why core testing gets done in only an hour. It's just not the sort of thing that would fit into the free or open source tier of Travis or hosted GitLab.com testing.
Yeah.
Wonderful. And you know, I think it's very exciting to hear about all of these you know, features that are currently you know, running the gauntlet right now through all of these kinds of considerations. One of the questions I had though is, you know, when is kind of that threshold where after, you know, obviously we enable things like merge request tests and all of that, when do we envision this to come out of beta? I know that we talked briefly about this before, but you know, what are some of the deliverables that the Drupal Association is waiting for before just turning this on for everybody?
Yeah, I mean, it really is. I think the two gates we're waiting on are when core is able to test, you know, 2 or 3 issues, and when the merge requests are enabled, I think we're ready to say go and flip it on for everyone. And that could be, I mean, I hate giving dates. It's so dangerous as an engineering manager to try and give any dates, but it could be very, very soon. Like it could be within a month or 2, depending on how carefully we choose which core issues to test it with, right? We want to pick those sorts of non-controversial issues that can do the whole life cycle quickly. But the remaining technical challenges, as Neil said before, getting the initial testing service set up is almost done. It's something he's been working on for the last couple weeks since DrupalCon. And core is in actually a good position in the core release cycle to pay attention to these test issues. So yeah, it's going to be very, very, very soon. So I'm sure there'll be an announcement on Drupal.org when we go through with it. But yeah, I'd love to see it sort of before the summer, or rather the fall equinox, if we can manage it.
Yeah, and it's yeah, I'm not too worried about turning it on too soon, because that's the sort of thing, like we can keep patch testing turned on to test the last few patches, and we're not forcing everyone to change their workflow immediately, but I'm sure there will be some maintainers who might say, you know, the maintainer of the project can certainly say, I'm not going to accept more patches, please post a merge request. So yeah, we'll have both running in parallel for a little bit, but probably not too long.
And one final side question, venturing a little bit further out. You know, I think a lot of people, we've shared a little bit about kind of how, you know, DrupalCI fits into this larger picture. And I think a lot of people are very curious about the future of DrupalCI. What's the future hold for DrupalCI?
I think we covered some of this in Neil's earlier comment, but yes, that's exactly the idea, is to look at GitLab CI as a replacement for not the entire end-to-end stack of DrupalCI, but for the orchestration layer that dispatches and coordinates a requested job to the Kubernetes environments, the Kubernetes cluster that will spin up your environment container with your appropriate PHP version with your custom requested Solr instance for whatever you're testing, right? And it looks like GitLab CI will actually be very well suited to that. So that'll be a great place to replace a major component of the Drupal CI infrastructure with the sort of standardized and off-the-shelf system that GitLab CI provides. So very excited about that.
Yeah, we won't miss our Jenkins instance for dispatcher. And yeah, standardizing to have this be even more container-based will make it easier for people to run locally as well. And yeah, just more flexibility since containers are relatively standard nowadays.
Well, I can't imagine why. I mean, Jenkins is really bleeding edge, isn't it? It's, you know. Anyways, absolutely. I think it'll be great to see all of this move over to container-based architecture and leveraging some of the latest and greatest like Kubernetes. So one question is, you know, obviously we talked a lot at length about the technical underpinnings and all of this amazing work that goes into making this happen. And I can't imagine that, you know, it's been a very easy road. One question I think that a lot of contributors have, a lot of folks in the Drupal community have is, how can we help? What are things that we can do as a community to take some of the burden and some of the workload off of your shoulders, Tim and Neil?
Yeah, I mean, there's two major areas. So the first one is the user interface and UX review. That's a more niche cause. So for all of the front-enders and UX folks who are listening, please, please, please come help us out in understanding the best way to create that good user experience with that single-threaded conversation we've talked about. That's something that we'll continue to refine even after this is released to the general public. So we'd love that sort of help. But the other obvious one that anybody who works on Drupal.org and maintains a project can do is opt your project into the beta. You find that link in the description below this podcast and jump on board and help us test things out. Neil, do you want to speak to maybe what people should look out for specifically as they're doing that beta testing?
Yeah, it's just getting more use cases for using these, using merge requests. Yeah, there are a few decisions like there's a few configurations on merge requests for what type of merge commit gets made, for example. But yes, having more examples, more use cases, so we can see how things look all together.
Cool.
Wonderful. Well, once again, you know, I think that everyone is very excited for all of the goodness that will come out of the GitLab migration. Obviously, so many nuances, so many complexities to resolve. I don't think that, you know, we can thank the Drupal Association and both of you enough for the incredible work that you've been doing. So, and now for something completely different. We have a segment on the Tag1 TeamTalk show called the Aside Tag, where we can share something cool or interesting that each of us is doing with the audience watching us today or listening to us in a podcast form. It could be something as simple as playing with a new technology, saw an awesome movie, trying to do some home building, as I know is a common thread on this Aside segment. So without further ado, I want to go ahead and turn to you first, Tim. What's going on in your life right now on the Aside Tag?
Yeah, so gosh, I feel like every call I keep talking about how the weekends blur together. So what I'm trying to do is find new interests and things to do. So I have never been a big flight sim geek or anything like that, but I saw some of the trailers for the new Microsoft Flight Simulator, where they have a full rendered planet Earth with a combination of AI-generated buildings and hand-sculpted 3D assets, and a full physical simulation of weather with volumetric clouds and all this stuff. And so I'm nerding out about the weather simulation possibilities. I'm going to have to figure out how to fly the damn planes just so I can look at the weather. But that's coming out sometime soon and something I'm looking forward to just give me something new, some variety on these weekends.
Wonderful. Next up, Neil, what's going on in your world?
Let's see. Leading up to DrupalCon Global, I was just spending a lot of time on this project because I was excited to get it done. But yeah, I had a little time since then to watch the Netflix Wild Wild Country, the documentary about the Rajneesh cult in Oregon. So that was a
intense,
interesting situation they had.
For sure.
That's wonderful. Finally, Michael Meyers, what's going on in your world?
I am loving our new dog collar. It's from Orvis. It's called Conceal a Collar. We live in a tick-infested area, and so we have a tick collar, the Seresto tick collar on the dog, in addition to his dog collar and all the tags. And this collar, as Conceal a Collar would indicate, actually puts the tick collar underneath the main collar, so you don't see it, which is great because it's like chemicals, and I don't want to really be touching it all the time when I'm like petting him. And it looks great, makes him even more handsome. And you can personalize it. He looks rather dapper, and we can put some information on it, which allowed us to remove one of his tags, so less jingle jangle. So everybody's happy. It's great. I love it. Check it out.
I love that. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, I want to see your dog on the next Drupal Pet Spa at some upcoming Drupal camp or something like that. We got to have a fashion show.
Oh, man, I can't wait.
Absolutely. And last but not least, I'll go ahead and share something that's going on. I've been recently struggling to find good television to watch. I generally am not a TV watcher, but it's been, it's hard. I mean, definitely need some distraction. And so one of the things that I've been doing is, on good authority, I've heard that watching Star Trek is a great distraction during this time right now. And I'm already about 90% done with the first season of the original series. And I got to say, I'm pretty impressed. Growing up as a kid watching Star Trek The Next Generation, Star Trek Enterprise, I don't even remember the titles anymore. And going all the way back to the original late 1960s show has been really eye-opening for me as somebody who's never identified as a Trekkie. So
yeah, that's some good stuff for sure. My wife's favorite is absolutely the original series. There's no debate in this household over which Trek is the best Trek.
It is very interesting. I do love some of the kind of low-tech, lo-fi things they've had to do to kind of simulate certain things.
It's fun.
Yeah. All righty. Well, that's all the time we have for today, unfortunately. I want to once again thank our dear friends Tim, Neil, and Michael for joining us on this episode today. As we mentioned during the talk, all the links that we are talking about today are going to be posted online together with the video and information about this episode. And if you like this episode of Tag1 Team Talks, please remember to upvote, subscribe, share it with your friends and family, share it with your favorite Drupal contributor down the block. And also check out past talks at tag1.com/tagteamtalks. And as always, we'd love your feedback and any topic suggestions. Feel free to write to us at tagteamtalks@tag1consulting.com. Thank you so much to our guests today, and see you next time.